Hello, welcome back. Part 2 of our tutorial, how to use a multimeter the proper way. We discussed one thing, we went over AC voltages. Now we're going to talk about DC voltages with the right sign for it, flat, because the voltage always stays flat with time. Now, first thing again, we're going to use the meter on volts. What's the first thing that we do to make sure our tools are working properly? First thing, as we said before, a resistance check. Okay? Let me try to get a little. Where do we put the probes? Number one, put the probes right here. Voltage, ohms, and diode function. Now, what do? We short the leads. Let's bring it over here. And we make sure to get, again, a steady reading as possible, and 0.1, 0.2 ohms is acceptable. Again, if you measure 1 ohms, it's too much. Probes have to be changed. If you get a fluctuating number, if it keeps on fluctuating like this, probes are broken internally. Change these probes. Now, for one thing, let's say the probes, I think the probes are not making contact, right? In other words, when I shorted them together, I got that fluctuating number. I'm not sure. I think that these probes are broken inside. How do I prove it? Put this in here, and you try to make contact. You see how you're making contact? That means this probe is good. You're measuring 0.3 ohms, which means I'm going from here to here. This probe is good. The problem must be the other probe. Again, I want to make sure that this probe from here is not broken. The quickest way is put it in here, and boom, right there. I know this. I'm measuring continuity, and I know the probe is good. Okay? Whether it's the black one or it's this, I take out this one, I put the black one, and I put in here. The same wire from here to here. I'm measuring continuity from here to here. Okay? That's something hopefully I haven't seen anywhere when they talk about multimeters. Let's get to the nitty-gritty. We talked about AC. Let's talk about DC. Which one do I put it on? This one. The one that has the flat sign. Okay? What do? Let's put back the common one. Okay? Now, we put back the common one. What are we going to do? We said for AC, polarity does not matter. Whichever way I go, and I demonstrated it. Does DC polarity matter? Yes, it does. The common battery that we use every single day of our lives, right? How do I know? This is, as you can see, the minus is here, the positive is here. Okay? Every battery has to tell you a designation of which one is positive or minus, regardless of it. Any kind of battery. A power supply has polarity. So DC over here, easy experiment. We go over here. How much should we measure on a battery that's not loaded down? This is not under a load condition right now. How much should I measure? 1.5? More than that. Watch. 1.6. Why do we measure 1.6? Doesn't it say 1.5? Right? Doesn't it say 1.5? Well, because there's no load to it. There's no load. When there's no load, what do I mean by no load? It's not in the radio, or it's not in the appliance that it's supposed to be plugged in. When you plug it in, the voltage should go down to around 1.5. So without anything connected to it, I should read 1.6. Okay? Now let's say I made a mistake. Instead of doing this way, right? I put this way, and I put this way. I changed the wrong polarity. A little hard to see, but okay. Look at the negative sign. See the negative sign on the meter? Under where it says, see battery? It says auto and then battery. That means I have the wrong leads connected wrong in reverse. What do? Either flip the battery correctly or flip the leads, which is easier, right? But that negative sign, you saw the negative sign over here? That means it's negative. Okay? If I measure a car battery and I put the leads the wrong way, no problem. You don't blow up the meter. What reverse to what people think. Nothing bad is going to happen. All it is going to tell you minus 12.6 volts. That's it. But but don't plug it in. The cable's reverse. That's the most important. Okay? So remember, there are negative DC. There is negative with respect to ground. You have positive with respect to ground, and you have negative voltage with respect to ground. Remember that. So I can measure 12 volts, and with respect to ground, I can measure minus 12 volts. Both correct. Doesn't mean your polarities are reversed. That's the voltage with respect to ground. Okay? I hope that cleared things up. But again, let's say I made a mistake. Boy, the lighting is a little dark here. But anyway, let's say again I made a mistake. This is supposed to be in volts. Okay? It's supposed to be in volts. I have it in volts. Again, I made a mistake. Look at this over here. You hear that? You hear that clicking? That beeping, actually. You hear that? Fluke multimeter, the fluke, is telling you you have this in the wrong slot. You're making a mistake. I'm not going to let you measure DC. Okay? What happens again? Again, the same thing. You hear that clicking? Whether it's on AC like we had before, whether it's on DC like before, you are making a mistake. Which is the proper one? This one. You don't hear clicking now, do you? Right? That's one. Now this one, I like this because see how dark it is? It puts on the light. Okay? So milliamps, I use a different one. Now I'm going to show you the different type of probes, end probes that I use. So far, again, in conclusion, very important. You want to be automotive, you have to use the tools properly. I go over this many, many times. What's the first thing that I do? And I did this before in the other video. Put this on ohms. Make sure these are together. All the videos that are there, all the videos that are there that I've seen, right? They just tell you if you want to measure voltage, put it on voltage. How do you know that the probes are not broken inside? You don't know until you go to resistance first and make sure these work correctly. That's a bad habit of using multimeters or using any test equipment. First, you calibrate the equipment, make sure the equipment works first. If not, you're going to be chasing voltages that you think should be there and are not there and say maybe it's a bad ground, maybe it's not a bad ground. No, that's not the way you use diagnostic tools. I'm sorry. Okay? That's that. All right? Now, obviously, on this function over here, where you have this over here, means it's going to ring for you. You've seen it and you heard it. Whether I have it on that, whether I have it this, I still should measure 0.2 or 0.1. When it gets to less than an ohm on this one, it'll beep. So you don't have to look at the meter. You don't even have to look at the meter. You just hear it. I know they're shorted together. Okay, that's just the point. Like I said, in conclusion, first do the ohms, then measure your voltage. Always, always. Just like when you put a battery, which one do you put first? When you put the clamp meters, the clamp leads on the clamp leads, now when you put on the clamp leads on the battery, I'm going to put the battery tester, whatever it is, right? First I put the positive first, always on the battery, and then I put the negative. You've heard it multiple times on many videos, as I also said. When you make measurements with a voltmeter, which one do you put first? Always put the negative first. The opposite of the batteries. Why? Because if you don't put the negative first and you put the positive first on the thing you're going to measure and you touch ground, whether it's chassis ground, whether it's a body ground, you're going to be the ground. The current is going to go through you. So first habit of measuring with voltmeters, always put first the negative, then the positive. These are things I've not seen in videos or whatever. I don't know for what reason, but it's very important. Very, very important. Any measurement, whether it's AC, whether it's DC, whatever it is, always put first the negative first. Always. Okay? That's that. All right? Remember that. Okay? That takes care of that I wanted to discuss. Again, I wanted to go over the different types of tips that you need. These are the straight ones. Sometimes you need the alligator tips. Sometimes you need very, very long tips. Let's say you have to get into the computer. You need longer ones. And I'll show you what I mean with all these things on the next video. But I hope this was helpful, like I said. And I hope that you learned something to do this the correct way. It has to be done the correct way. Diagnostic equipment is very helpful, but first, if you have to make sure it works correctly. Okay? Now, let's go to the next video. I hope this was helpful. Thanks for watching, as usual.